Hi everyone, greetings from my channel. As you listen to the stories I'm going to tell you, I hope you find them enjoyable. Please provide your city and the time you are listening to this story in the comments section below, if you would like. Who knows? I may even share a story about your city. I hope you have an amazing day. I am a killer you can hire on the deep web. Happy endings are for children. We read about how the princess marries the prince and they live happily ever after. Ever after is a mortgage creeping toward default and a husband that would rather spend the last of our savings getting drunk than deal with the fact that our son died violently. I spent weeks looking for answers, and anytime I've tried to explain all of these details, the drunk bastard was nice enough to say, "That's nice, honey. Happily ever after my ass." I was 2 years into a degree in computer science when this strapping young lad literally carried me off to wedded bliss in a horse-drawn carriage. 6 months later, I gave birth to the most beautiful baby boy. We settled into a decent house because he had a decent job. By the time my son was in first grade, we even managed to move to the suburbs. No one cares. No one cares that my son is dead. If it isn't the pedophiles that drove him to kill himself, it's the shooting truthers who flood my voicemail telling me that I'm a crisis actor and that my son never existed. Each day the list gets a little longer. There are benefits to having a working relationship with a group of individuals that specialize in murder. Glenn Wade died screaming. I watched via live stream as he begged for death. Sterling Rutherford and Andrew Rubens got to bleed out after being force-fed their dicks. Malcolm Turner got a bullet in the back of the head. I don't know how my son found these men, but I cannot help but love them for their work, and each day the list gets a little longer. I burned through my son's savings early. Contrary to what some of you in the comments might have been hoping for, I haven't been paying my debt through exhibitionism. Really, you see a grieving mother pouring her heart out, and you want something to objectify so you can masturbate? Like I said, the list just keeps getting longer. That's the thing about the little community my son stumbled across. It isn't so much that I'm hiring someone to kill someone else. It's more of a bounty board. Men and women from all walks of life take jobs from the master list and people die. It's almost like Craigslist, but for all manner of violent acts. Want someone to rape or torture your high school gym teacher? There's a subsection for that. Want someone to kill a drunk that stopped showing up to work and ended up costing your company a crucial account? Well, no one is going to miss my idiot husband. It's amazing how easy it is to make it look like a known alcoholic died in a single car accident. I think the most hilarious thing about all of this is that I started out looking to find justice for my son. Now, I cannot help but feel closer to him than I ever did when he was alive. It's easy to skate through life believing that there's a point to it all. It is so much more fulfilling to realize that life is as worthless or as meaningful as you choose to make it. My son calls me on occasion. Whether it is actually him or just a warning sign that I'm putting too many amphetamines in my system, I don't care. We talk. He told me that he tried to tell my husband about everything. He told me that he was proud of me for avenging him. He told me he loves me. My son loves me. He can rest now knowing I made sure everyone involved in making his life hell is now very dead. My son loves me. I love my son. It wasn't enough to kill the people who drove him to such a convoluted suicide, though. It doesn't take a lot of work to scrub something from the internet. Getting rid of any trace that my son existed was easy. Of course, I used a fake name for my son's middle school when I posted the first part. I don't want you tracking me or him down. After I post this update, I am likely to never log into this account again. I suppose that if anything, I just wanted to vent. I wanted to vent, and I wanted to warn you. Deep web, dark net, whatever you want to call it. There is a place on the internet where very scary people congregate. These are people that would as soon fuck you to death with power tools than ask for your opinion. These are people that keep a jar of human thumbs on their computer desk and masturbate to old episodes of The Price is Right while wearing their grandmother's used adult diapers. These are people like me. It took me a while to find my niche. My husband was just a test run. However, with a few kills under my belt, I've more than made my way into the inner circle of our little club. You wouldn't believe how many people get angry over comments on Reddit. And that's the thing. People recycle usernames. You link your Reddit to your Discord and your Discord to your Steam. You make forum posts on various websites discussing your comings and goings. You check into a place on Facebook and leave your privacy settings at public. Anonymity is a myth. With the right tools and access to the right search utilities, anyone on the internet can be identified. So this is my last update. My son is dead. His killer is dead. Jeff ended up on someone's list. I'm sure eventually I'll end up on someone's list. Until then, my list keeps getting longer. If you are the kind of bully that hides behind a keyboard and terrorizes others with your bullshit opinion and your unwarranted sense of entitlement, well, you never know when someone might offer up a bounty on your head. If you see me on the street, just nod and I'll know. I'm 34, decent looking, and recently single. Heck, you might have already matched with me on Tinder. I've got a picture where I am vaping and twirling a fidget spinner. I've got a decent gamer score on Xbox Live. Shit, I've even got a video on Instagram where I am watching Rick and Morty with friends. And I've got 20 more profiles with 20 more personalities. I'm out there, and I'm just waiting to see your name on my list. Hell hath no fury like a mother scorned. I've been reading the comments, and frankly, I think some of your responses are sad. For one, my son was 13. Implying that I wouldn't know how to use a computer is hilarious. I'm 34. I've been online longer than my son had been alive. That's the difference between my generation and yours. When I did all my crazy stuff online, there wasn't such a thing as social media. Let's just say that if you had been running around on the old Yahoo chat user rooms or played around on Freednode IRC, that you would have run into more than one woman like myself that had been a bit of an exhibitionist in college. John Garrett had manipulated my son into performing lewd acts on webcam. The sick fuck had convinced my son that it would build his self-esteem. What started with nude selfies or the occasional cam show turned into David performing on live streams for rooms full of anonymous pedophiles who would tip him with Bitcoin and other assorted cryptocurrencies. I accessed his Bitcoin wallet and found that these men had paid my son a sum in excess of 4 Bitcoin. Feel free to check the conversion rate on that one. That was simply my son's cut. From reading the chat logs, I can only surmise that John Garrett was keeping the larger portion of these tips for himself. Somewhere along the way, a few students at his school figured out that my son was a homosexual. Apparently, my son had expressed a crush on a local boy who did not share his affection. These idiot kids proceeded to push him into lockers or call him a faggot. When my son would bring this to the attention of his teachers, they'd do nothing. This led to my son talking to John Garrett. If Jeff TK hadn't already seen to his death, I'd have already spent an evening or two peeling the skin from John Garrett's dick with a potato peeler. If you haven't guessed already, I'm not posting these updates in real time. Over the course of the last few weeks, I have become a bitter woman. I've been using my son's Adderall to stay awake and my husband's vodka to take the edge off. I've already cataloged all of the information on my son's desktop. I used the funds from his Bitcoin wallet to procure a new laptop, and I've spent my days at home diving into the world John Garrett had introduced him to. Once I was fairly certain I had familiarized myself with enough of the details, I went back to that private IRC server with my own screen name. I messaged Jeff TK and asked for a QR code I could use to send him the remaining payment. No questions were asked, and I sent him the $5,000 my son owed him. What followed was a conversation that read like this. Pose Mom. So how does this work? Can I give you another list of names? Jeff TK. A list of names? For what? Pose Mom. Cute. My son was short-sighted. It didn't take me long to figure out most of his viewers were associates of John Garrett. Jeff TK. We are well aware of that situation. Pose Mom. How long did you have a rat on his system? Jeff TK. Long enough. I assume you have 3 names for me? Pose Mom. 4. Jeff TK. 4? Pose Mom. 4. Andrew Rubens, Sterling Rutherford, Malcolm Turner, and Glenn Wade. Jeff TK. Who is Glenn Wade? Pose Mom. Glenn Wade is a poster on Reddit who encouraged my son to kill himself. Jeff TK. This will cost you more than you have. Pose Mom. I'm sure we can work something out. Jeff TK. I'm sure we can. 3 men who worked as school counselors at various local schools would be having a very bad week. 1 internet troll would be having a very bad day. Even after dumping all of my son's cryptocurrency, I would still be in debt to these men for more than $10,000. I didn't care that people were going to die. Any sympathy I had for the world died with my son. No sooner than I had secured this deal, though, I received a phone call. I answered, and a very familiar voice said, "Mom, what have you done?" 3 weeks of hatred fell away as the tears poured from my eyes. I replied, "David, baby, is that you?" "Why, Mom? Why are you doing this?" David said in a concerned tone. I shot back, "They took you away from me, baby. I'm going to make them pay for it in blood." I stared down at the cordless handset and realized that it was off. I had been awake for longer than a week. It was becoming harder and harder to distinguish what was real and what was just another hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. I stared at the handset and cried all over again. My son was gone. He had spent the last months of his life being violated and abused by those he was supposed to trust the most. Worst of all, instead of coming to me, he chose to die. No one was going to come out of this sitting pretty. I popped 3 more pills and chased it with a mixture of Sprite and vodka. It wasn't long before I received a DM that read, "You ready to earn the rest of that money? Happy endings are for children. We read about how the princess marries the prince and they live happily ever after." Ever after is a mortgage creeping toward default and a husband that would rather spend the last of our savings getting drunk than deal with the fact that our son died violently. I spent weeks looking for answers, and anytime I've tried to explain all of these details, the drunk bastard was nice enough to say, "That's nice, honey." Happily ever after my ass. I was 2 years into a degree in computer science when this strapping young lad literally carried me off to wedded bliss in a horse-drawn carriage. 6 months later, I gave birth to the most beautiful baby boy. We settled into a decent house because he had a decent job. By the time my son was in 1st grade, we even managed to move to the suburbs. No one cares. No one cares that my son is dead. If it isn't the pedophiles that drove him to kill himself, it's the shooting truthers who flood my voicemail, telling me that I'm a crisis actor and that my son never existed. Each day the list gets a little longer. There are benefits to having a working relationship with a group of individuals that specialize in murder. Glenn Wade died screaming. I watched via live stream as he begged for death. Sterling Rutherford and Andrew Rubens got to bleed out after being force-fed their dicks. Malcolm Turner got a bullet in the back of the head. I don't know how my son found these men, but I cannot help but love them for their work. And each day the list gets a little longer. I burned through my son's savings early. Contrary to what some of you in the comments might have been hoping for, I haven't been paying my debt through exhibitionism. Really? You see a grieving mother pouring her heart out, and you want something to objectify so you can masturbate? Like I said, the list just keeps getting longer. That's the thing about the little community my son stumbled across. It isn't so much that I'm hiring someone to kill someone else. It's more of a bounty board. Men and women from all walks of life take jobs from the master list, and people die. It's almost like Craigslist, but for all manner of violent acts. Want someone to rape or torture your high school gym teacher? There's a subsection for that. Want someone to kill a drunk that stopped showing up to work and ended up costing your company a crucial account? Well, no one is going to miss my idiot husband. It's amazing how easy it is to make it look like a known alcoholic died in a single-car accident. I think the most hilarious thing about all of this is that I started out looking to find justice for my son. Now, I cannot help but feel closer to him than I ever did when he was alive. It's easy to skate through life believing that there's a point to it all. It is so much more fulfilling to realize that life is as worthless or as meaningful as you choose to make it. My son calls me on occasion. Whether it is actually him or just a warning sign that I'm putting too many amphetamines in my system, I don't care. We talk. He told me that he tried to tell my husband about everything. He told me that he was proud of me for avenging him. He told me he loves me. My son loves me. He can rest now knowing I made sure everyone involved in making his life hell is now very dead. My son loves me. I love my son. It wasn't enough to kill the people who drove him to such a convoluted suicide, though. It doesn't take a lot of work to scrub something from the internet. Getting rid of any trace that my son existed was easy. Of course, I used a fake name from my son's middle school when I posted the first part. I don't want you tracking me or him down. After I post this update, I am likely to never log into this account again. I suppose that if anything, I just wanted to vent. I wanted to vent, and I wanted to warn you. deep web, darknet, whatever you want to call it. There is a place on the internet where very scary people congregate. These are people that would as soon fuck you to death with power tools than ask for your opinion. These are people that keep a jar of human thumbs on their computer desk and masturbate to old episodes of The Price is Right while wearing their grandmother's used adult diapers. These are people like me. It took me a while to find my niche. My husband was just a test run. However, with a few kills under my belt, I've more than made my way into the inner circle of our little club. You wouldn't believe how many people get angry over comments on Reddit. And that's the thing. People recycle usernames. You link your Reddit to your Discord and your Discord to your Steam. You make forum posts on various websites discussing your comings and goings. You check into a place on Facebook and leave your privacy settings at public. Anonymity is a myth. With the right tools and access to the right search utilities, anyone on the internet can be identified. So this is my last update. My son is dead. His killer is dead. Jeff ended up on someone's list. I'm sure eventually I'll end up on someone's list. Until then, my list keeps getting longer. If you are the kind of bully that hides behind a keyboard and terrorizes others with your bullshit opinion and your unwarranted sense of entitlement, well, you never know when someone might offer up a bounty on your head. If you see me on the street, just nod and I'll know. I'm 34, decent looking, and recently single. Heck, you might have already matched with me on Tinder. I've got a picture where I am vaping and twirling a fidget spinner. I've got a decent gamer score on Xbox Live. Shit, I've even got a video on Instagram where I'm watching Rick and Morty with friends. And I've got 20 more profiles with 20 more personalities. I'm out there, and I'm just waiting to see your name on my list. Hell hath no fury like a mother scorned. I found a link buried on an old dark web forum. I wish I never clicked it. The dark web. The name itself is a meme. It's become the boomer boogeyman, the back alley of the internet where you go to get your kidneys harvested and sold off to a billionaire's all-you-can-torture buffet. It's the skeezy part of town, the no man's land of the digital world, chock full of society's most vile scum. It's also pretty boring. See, the dark web really isn't that much different than the surface web. Sure, it has a cooler name and better privacy, but most people use it for the same shit. Social media? Check. Shopping? Check. Pirating movies? Duh. Did you know Facebook exists on the dark web? You do now. My parents are terrified of the dark web. They speak about it hushed breaths, sort of like Ron Weasley talks about Lord Voldemort. It's as though they think uttering its name too loudly will invoke the wrath of some serial hacker, just waiting in the wings to delete their bank accounts. Ridiculous, right? I told them they were paranoid. To prove them wrong, I even downloaded the Tor browser and uninstalled Chrome. There's nothing to fear on the dark web, I said, so long as you've got half a brain's worth of sense in you. Now I wish I could take it all back. I stumbled across the website after a long night of drinking. I'd been out with Jared, my best friend since childhood, reminiscing about the good old days of driving Mrs. Crabtree up the wall. When I got home, I felt a bit nostalgic, so I went digging for old pictures on Facebook. Like most drunk missions, one thing led to another, and I landed on an old thread listing the most exciting websites on the dark web. Whoops. Most were fairly vanilla. Some free textbooks here, a bit of hacked video games there. I scrolled down through the responses until I found one buried beneath the others. It had just a single upvote. Monster Call 143D1 Onion. I stared at the link for a few seconds, then cracked a fresh beer and said, fuck it. The website was plain, mostly white text on a black background. Across the top was a banner emblazoned with the words, "Call your monsters." I cracked a grin. It was kind of cute, in an edgelord emo kid sort of way. After clicking through a few menu links, I landed on the Order a Monster page. It said that for $99, they would deliver a personalized monster to a doorstep of my choice. Free shipping, too. The flavor text read, "Perfect for getting even with terrible bosses, backstabbing friends, and childhood enemies," I laughed. The idea was absolute gold. They even had a monster call guarantee of same-day shipping. How they managed to pull that off, I had no idea. Maybe they had a network of paid actors, patiently waiting to dress up in Halloween costumes and say a few canned lines on somebody's doorstep. Or maybe it was like Build-A-Bear, where you got to design your own stuffed version of ghouls like Dracula and the Wolfman. Whatever it was, I decided I was far too drunk to give a shit about how they made it happen. All I knew was $100 was a damn steal. I smashed the order button, and it brought me to a follow-up page titled Design Your Monster. It practically licked my lips. This was the juicy bit. The website gave me a drop-down list of selectable options based on modifiable body parts. The mouth, for instance, had fangs, broken teeth, no mouth, multiple mouths, and too many teeth. I thought the idea of too many teeth sounded ridiculous enough to be awesome. So I picked that and went down the list and selected the rest of the monster's attributes, including its body type, its subspecies, and finally its power. The next page said, leave a message. I mulled it over for a few minutes before deciding to keep it simple. I typed boo into the text field. Once I was finished, I clicked complete, and it brought me to a new screen that made me jump. It was a webcam video of me staring shocked at my laptop. The stream was live. At the top of the page, a red text banner proclaimed, "Perform the blood sacrifice?" I cocked an eyebrow. What? As if in answer to my confusion, a list of instructions faded into view on the bottom of the screen. Utter the name of your recipient. Pierce your skin, consume your blood. I burst out laughing. This was too wild. Not only were they going to deliver a monster to somebody's doorstep, but they were going to include a goofy ritual video too. All right, I decided, I'm game. I went downstairs and grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and headed back up to my room. Holding my hand up with a coy grin, I pricked my thumb with the tip of the blade. Jared Mayhew, I announced dramatically. I stuffed my bleeding thumb into my mouth and sucked it clean. Then I held it up, drunk and proud, as evidence of my dark ritual complete. Seconds passed and nothing happened. Then the screen went black and a new page appeared. Order complete, delivery in progress. I sipped my beer, wondering how Jared would react to my spooky surprise landing on his doorstep tomorrow. I really hoped they included the blood sacrifice bit. Jared and his wife Alyssa both hated blood, so they'd never let me live it down. And that was exactly what I wanted. A couple of seconds later, a new screen popped up. Delivery complete. Stand by for results. Already, that didn't make any sense. How did they manage to create my order and ship it across the country, all in the span of 5 minutes? A depressing realization swept over me. My drunk ass had been duped. There was no way they'd be able to ship something that quickly, so the only explanation was A, it was a scam, or B, it was just some lame email jump scare. Fuck. Now the $99 made more sense. There was no way a tiny startup could offer same-day delivery and a compelling product for so little money. It was a pipe dream logistically. Defeated, I decided that was enough dark web shopping for one night and time to pack it in. I closed my laptop, brushed my teeth, and hopped into bed. My phone vibrated. I stared at it, wondering who would be messaging me at this hour. Jared, maybe? He was just as drunk as I was and probably high as a kite by now, too. I picked it up and saw one new email from Monster Call. Odd, I never gave them my email address. Order delivered. Click here to view results. View results? I heaved a sigh. This was either a virus or some guarantee that Jared got a corny, spooky email. Still drunk, still making poor decisions, I clicked the link and it opened a video feed of Jared's house. I sat up, my tiredness vanishing in a tidal wave of what the fuck. The video was dimly lit, and the way it bobbed up and down looked like it was being recorded off of somebody's cell phone. Jared's small two-bedroom home was there in all of its suburban glory. Something about the video felt off, though. Wrong. I told myself to relax. This was just some prank or gag. The company probably put out a call for a fraction of the money to any locals, and somebody pulled the contract. No doubt they were going to walk up the front steps, knock on his door, and then say boo and run off or some shit. It wasn't a big deal, so why was my heart racing? The video neared the house, the footsteps going slowly. In the silence of the night, I heard the person behind the camera breathing. They sounded frightened, scared. Why? Lights went on inside the house. painting the windows in a dull yellow glow. I squinted, seeing dark shapes darting behind the curtains. Thoroughly confused, I decided to message Jared and ask if he got my surprise. Terrence. Sup, dude? You get my special delivery? Ha ha ha. Jared. Hey, P. Jared scame. Wathing Jared, inside the house. Dark splotches splattered against the curtains. A moment later, a woman's scream rang out, and the window shattered. Two hands reached out from behind the billowing curtains, gripping the side of the windowsill. Then two more gripped the top. A figure emerged, lurching out of the opening and into the yard. It looked familiar. Jesus Christ, it looked familiar. It stood 8 feet tall, with large bat wings flared out behind it, and 4 crooked, muscular arms clenching in and out of fists. The person behind the camera stumbled backward, muttering something incoherent. The creature swiveled its head toward them. The video feed shifted. Images of the sidewalk flew up and down as the cameraman ran full tilt from Jared's house, heaving panicked gasps. I caught muffled fragments of prayers. Then a shriek sounded, followed by the flap of powerful wings. The video crashed, tumbling in a blur of pixels. A man's voice shouted for help, and then something heavy crunched, and his voice died with a wheeze. Another shriek filled the night, and a shadow appeared, gazing down toward the discard cell phone. It had 4 arms, a pair of wings, and a mouth filled with rows and rows of teeth. Too many teeth. I lurched forward, swallowing the vomit in my throat. In one of the creature's arms was a 30-something man, struggling wordlessly against the monster's might. His chest looked like it had been caved in. The creature leaned towards him, pressed its teeth against his face, and slowly bit down. The man's legs kicked and jolted as the beast's teeth began rotating like a blender, tearing his flesh from his skull. It dropped him there, convulsing and dying, then beat its great wings and took off into the sky. Moments later, I heard confused shouts. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. More hollers. People called for the police. Other neighbors told children to get back inside. I put my phone down, horrified. It had to have been a joke. There simply was no way that had actually happened. It couldn't have. It was too gruesome, too violent. That was digital effects all the way. It had to be. They were great at those these days, weren't they? The next day I got a call from Jared's parents. His mother tried to talk, but she couldn't get past the tears, so she put Jared's father on the line. He explained that something terrible happened last night. My heart slammed in my chest. What happened? I asked. I told myself to relax, that there was nothing to worry about. Monsters didn't exist. I knew that. Terrence, he said quietly, this isn't easy to talk about, and it's harder to hear, but last night somebody broke into Jared and Alyssa's home. Police think it was sometime around 2 in the morning. My jaw hung limp, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. A terrible coincidence. That's all it was. A terrible, horrible coincidence. I don't know how to say this, he said, so I'm just going to come right out with it. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was as fragile as glass. The intruder that broke in, he mutilated them. Mutilated, I said in a small voice. Oh my God, Jesus. Yes, I'm sorry to tell you all this, but you were you were best friend, and I think it's better that you hear this from me than the newspaper. He paused as though summoning the courage to say the next words. According to the police, the psychopath that broke in gnawed their faces off. Vomit rose in my stomach. I forced it down. Oh Christ, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I ran a hand through my hair, gripping it forcefully and pulling on it, praying the pain would wake me from this nightmare. Please, Roger, let me handle the funeral preparations. You and Charlene should take this time to grieve. You? That's the thing, Roger said, his voice tremoring with emotion. There won't be a funeral. What? They're still alive, Terrence. That son of a bitch left them, broken and bleeding, to live with the torture he'd inflicted on them. He choked back a sob before recomposing himself. So far, there's no trace of the bastard. The only lead the cops have is a crumpled note they found on the doorstep. He left a note. Yeah, but it was just one word, practically useless. I swallowed. What did it say? Boo. I sold myself on the deep web. What do you do when there is nothing else left? I was a college graduate who, 2 years after collecting my certificate, was still unemployed. There was a gaping blank on my resume. Add to that the fact that my debts were out of control, and it's fair to say I was a mess, and growing ever more desperate. So what was I doing about this? How was I digging myself out of a hole? I was staying up all night trawling through the internet. Is there a point at which the internet does end and sanity begins? I neither knew nor cared. I watched thousands of clips, read conspiracy theories and news reports until they blurred into one stream of hyperbole. I slept fitfully during the day and went back online the minute I woke up. I would surf even though I needed to go to the bathroom, until it hurt. I forgot to eat or drink, and soon I had a permanent background headache. Like a lot of addicts, it was not long before I moved on to the harder stuff, the deep web. I was sickened by a lot of what I saw, but still immersed myself more and more. When I stumbled across the site that changed my life, it looked fairly innocuous at first. There was a simple hero image of the outline of a human body and a drop-down menu in the top right-hand side, accessed via 3 short lines. For other people, it's one more bet, one more drink. I clicked on one more link. I was surprised to see only 2 options, buyer and seller. I wasn't going to be buying anything real soon, so I followed the Warren Marks seller. This sub-menu left me open-mouthed. It listed items that could be sold and gave the price the seller would receive. All I needed to do was add details for my preferred way to receive payment, then tick the box next to the item. The first item on the list was likeness. For the price shown, I could pay the 2 months I was overdue on my rent and buy wine and pizza every night for a week with what was left over. Now I was not sure what was meant by likeness. Other items that I could sell via the website were more straightforward. Things like my social security number, my date of birth, even my name. A lot of these seemed like a way to commit fraud for the buyers. All very dubious, but at least I thought they were paying to use these details rather than simply stealing them as so often happened. Likeness seemed more ethereal though. I decided it meant the right to use my image, a photograph of my face. I also decided I really wanted a beer and pizza and to be able to tell my landlord to get off my back because I have paid your damn rent. I added my details for the money transfer and ticked the box next to likeness. Pressed submit. A transaction processing symbol turned into transaction complete. A new box appeared giving me the option to comment. I typed, "Do you need me to send you my photograph?" Thinking this would answer my question about what exactly I had just sold. A moment later, the reply came. "We already have it." I flashed back to some of the things I had done in front of the computer screen, then decided I would rather not think about it. Feeling nervous, sure I was being scammed, about to kick myself for being so naive. I checked my balance. What do you know? The money was in there. I went back to the good old innocent web and ordered the largest, most overloaded pizza I could think of, then began to add sides. It took 2 weeks for me to blow the money from selling my likeness. I had had a great time without leaving my apartment, and I had paid no rent. Not to worry, I told myself, and returned to the deep web and my new favorite website. This time, I hovered over fingerprints. 30 seconds, considering, flagged a dozen dodgy things this could lead to, but it was the money I would make that made me think, whatever. I ticked and submitted. This time, 10 small boxes appeared on screen with an instruction for me to place the ends of my fingers in them, which I did, and within seconds the transaction was complete, and within minutes I could see that I was once again flush. Problems over. I could pay my rent and enough off a credit card to make that bank back off. In the comment box I typed, "Thank you." The reply was almost immediate. "You are welcome. Now I don't know if anyone reading this is a gambler, but I guess if they are, they would not by now have put money on me spending the money wisely. And they would be right. This time I told myself another couple of weeks later, I would get my act in gear. I spent significant time going through the items I could sell and created a spreadsheet with how much I owed, so I knew the amount I needed to earn with this one final sale of part of me. I had decided, you see, that this had to be the last time. There was a relatively small number of things left I could sell that I was prepared to sell. My name, date of birth, and social security number were still no-goes. I did not want to risk losing the ability to have a bank account and find employment. A history of being a disaster did not mean, in my mind, that I always would be. So one final sale it was, then clear my debts and find a job. I ticked the box next to sell body part. From the next list, ticked kidney. I was close to hyperventilating when I pressed submit, close to tears not long afterwards when I checked my balance. I felt a huge pressure being lifted. With this money, I could finally get my life back on track. The comment box already had text in it. I had been too worked up to read it, so I took a deep breath and did. It was an 8-digit reference number, an address and a time later that day. An appointment for me to have my kidney removed, I figured. I considered not going. I already had the money, so why bother? Then I thought back to the message telling me they already had my photograph. Whoever ran the website probably knew where I lived as well, or could easily find out. It was not rocket science to work out that they were probably bad people, criminals, some kind of gang. Not people to cross or mess with. I felt sick as I left the apartment at the prospect of having an operation, but also elated at the amazing things lying ahead for me. I just needed to get this over with. The address turned out to be a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. The windows were all shuttered and there was no signage, just the human outline I recognized from the website. A keypad was fixed into the wall next to a sturdy-looking door. Not sure what else to do, I entered my reference number. The door slid open with a sigh. My stomach doing backflips, I stepped inside. I could hear the drone of an air conditioner, but still suddenly felt very hot. Nerves, I told myself. Totally natural. I seemed to be in some kind of reception area, but it was deserted, unscratch that. A man appeared. He was wearing a white overall and mask and safety glasses. He may or may not have been smiling when he said, "Welcome, let's get you prepped." I followed him along a long corridor. The walls were blank, whitewashed, and the smell of antiseptic was growing stronger. Eventually, he turned off into a small windowless room. I hesitated on the threshold. There was a raised table, fluorescent strips overhead, a stack of equipment next to the bed. Medical, I guessed, though I had no idea. "Please," the man said and gestured that I should come in. I smiled weakly and did. He gave me a robe to put on and turned to do something to the equipment while I got changed. I assumed I needed to lie on the table, and when he looked round from whatever it was he had been doing and saw me, he said, "Good." Made me feel like a dog rolling over and playing dead, but I kept this to myself. I did, though, have some questions. "Is this safe?" I asked. "Perfectly," he replied without missing a beat. I wasn't sure. I felt hot to the point where I thought I was going to faint, and the lighting overhead was flickering, making pain start to flower above my eyes. "I'm not sure I want to go ahead with this," I said. "There is nothing to be concerned about," he replied, and before I realized what was happening, had nicked the skin of my neck with a needle. I immediately felt an unpleasant tingling sensation, and a numbness began to spread up into my face. He picked up a tablet computer that was resting among the equipment and studied it for a moment before turning back to look at me and asking, "Now, which eye would you like to keep?" "What?" I exclaimed, or tried to, because my lips were numb and the word came out slurred. "What are you talking about?" I managed. "I sold one of my kidneys, not my eyes." I did not wait for an answer. I was horrified and decided I wanted out of there. I tried to sit up, but the numbness had spread to my spine and then my arms. I was helpless to do anything but lie there and watch as he once more studied the tablet. No, he said in a quiet, relaxed voice. "The records show that you agreed to sell a body part, but did not specify which one." I ticked kidney, I tried to say, but by now my mouth would not move, and I could not feel my tongue. I could feel my heart beating faster and faster, felt like I could not breathe. Cold sweat trickled down into my eyes, blurring my vision. I could see this. I could not feel it. I wanted to scream, wanted to cry out in terror, but my jaws were locked, my limbs useless. All I could do was watch as the scalpel came into view and as he lowered it slowly towards my left eye. "It will all be over soon," he said, and then the blade became a shadow over my eye, a darkness that was soon all I could see. That was then. This is now. I am writing this in an internet cafe, after trashing my laptop's hard drive and ditching it. There's just me in here and the owner. I think he would like me to leave from the dirty looks he is giving me. But before I head off, I have one more thing to do. I have enough money to buy a coach ticket and go a long way from here, away from everything and everyone I have ever known. I have just logged onto the site and found what I'm looking for in the seller menu. Name, date of birth, social security number, tick sell on all three. Enter the details in the boxes that pop up, press submit, and moments later the money is in my account. I have been withdrawing as much cash I can daily, and after I go across the road to the ATM and withdraw the latest amount, I will snap my card in half and throw it away. This will be a fresh start, the past wiped clean, left behind. I'm going to stop writing now and go. It's time to log off for good and make my escape. Only the screen has changed, the comment box has opened up, and a new message has appeared. We like and follow you. I feel tears begin to flow from the eye they did not take. My daughter had a slumber party 3 days ago. She hasn't woken up since. I don't know where else to post this, but I can't sleep. Not now. It was finally time for the rite of passage for Becky, my oldest. She had just turned 10, and I told her it was okay to have her friends over for a night. There were a few ground rules, of course. Everyone needed to be upstairs ready for bed by 9, and then asleep by 10. No boys allowed, no scary movies, and no shenanigans. I figured it wouldn't be anything different from a typical sleepover, but the next morning when I went to wake them, Becky was not responding. "Come on now, we have to go to your Uncle Taylor's," I insisted, but still nothing happened. At first I thought it was just her being stubborn, but after I went to get my husband Daniel to wake her, and there was still no response, I quickly called 911. As I returned from the phone call, I turned to the other girls for some sort of explanation. "Not sure. She did say she was really tired, though," one girl named Jessica said. "Is she dead?" Susan asked. We had checked every 5 minutes to make sure her breathing didn't stop, and when EMT got there, we confirmed that she was basically in a deep coma. "We should get her to the hospital and perform a CAT scan immediately if possible," one paramedic suggested. Together, they lifted my comatose daughter from the floor of her room, and I watched helplessly as they took her away. The next 24 hours were a mother's worst nightmare. They ran test after test after test to see what might be wrong with her. The only thing I was thankful for was that she was asleep, until one of the nurses whispered how terrible it was that they had to keep poking and prodding her, and that Becky could feel everything. "You mean she can feel the pain?" I must have looked livid because they were trying to find an explanation, and although they did give one, I was still frustrated with them. "She is in a sleep state, like REM. It's not like going under anesthesia. Patients in comas feel pain all the time," one nurse told me. Daniel, meanwhile, had turned to the internet to find something that might explain this. Bizarre sleep syndromes and stories of people just falling into an endless slumber abounded, but very few answers. The doctors weren't much help either. They claimed that the only thing they could do was monitor her and wait for her to snap out of it. Daniel and I took shifts at her bedside, watching her closely and scouring every corner of the web for answers. There was one site that he found that suggested shock therapy could potentially jolt her awake. And after this third day, I was ready to try anything to get our little girl back. Of course, the hospital was against it, but as a parent, I had reached my breaking point. I needed to know why this had happened, and I needed it to get better. So we discharged her voluntarily and claimed we would monitor her with home health. Instead, Daniel and I concocted a strange ritual. We found the tools we needed to provide her body just enough of a kickstart from hardware stores and set up a makeshift OR in her room. I was the one to administer the shock, but nothing happened. And when I did it again, all I saw was her levels beginning to increase. It was a spark of hope that made me want to keep going forward. As the monitors spiked in activity, Daniel rushed to my side and pulled me away. "Stop! Stop! It's not working," he said. I did my best to not burst into tears, and then watched as the minute flatlined. "No! No, 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 no! Not my baby! Not like this!" I screamed. I kept trying the makeshift paddles on her body, but it was too late. Our stupid mistake had cost our daughter her life. I went to bed that night despondent and angry. I wanted to end my own life for the stupid, impulsive choices I made. And since I couldn't sleep, I went into Becky's room to get a good look at our angel before we buried her. To my surprise, she was sitting up in bed when I opened the door. "Becky, are you okay?" I asked in shock. "Mom, what happened?" she asked blandly. I ran up to her and hugged her so tight. "Oh, baby, I thought we lost you." "Oh, thank God," I screamed as I held her and nearly refused to let go. "Where am I? Is this heaven?" she whispered. "What? No, baby, no, it's okay," I said. "But that's not possible. I saw you die. You died. You and Dad," she said weirdly. "I killed you," she added. I pulled away from her and looked at her eyes. It looked like she was still asleep, like her pupils were dilating. I ran to my husband to get him awake, but he refused to open his eyes. Then I heard my daughter at the door. She was smiling and had a knife in her hand. "Just let him sleep, Mother." "Becky, put that knife down." She cocked her head and pointed the weapon at me as I reached for my phone. "I'll put it down when you go to bed." Slowly, I crawled under the covers. I laid there, still as a board until she left, convinced I had fallen asleep. But I haven't, and I won't, and I'm not so sure I should wake my husband either. Something is eating my neighbors. I first noticed it last Tuesday morning when I looked out the window and saw that Luis, the old man in the apartment across the street, wasn't out on his balcony by 7 a.m., waving to that bald figure with his fluffy bathrobe. Coffee cup and newspaper had become part of my morning routine, and his absence bothered me more than I would have imagined. It was as though, without me noticing, some subtle and sinister change had taken place in my world, throwing it into a disquieting new orbit. The apartment 2 stories above Luis's had also gone dark. 2 kids lived there, and they were always up to something, sticking their drawings to the window, jumping on the beds, or singing into a child-sized plastic karaoke machine. Now, however, there was nothing but blackness in their rooms, and an ominous breeze seemed to blow through their white curtains. Even when it rained on Wednesday and Thursday, no one bothered to close the windows. Worse still, when I rang Luis to check on him, with no answer of course, I saw that his mailbox was stuffed full of mail and newspapers. Luis was so meticulous I could have set my watch by him. There was no way he would have left without putting a hold on his precious daily news. Even so, I didn't really start to worry until the noise upstairs came to a sudden stop. The 20-something couple in that unit had a very active lifestyle, getting up early, working out in the middle of the day, and hosting parties late into the night. From the sound of it, they also had a very healthy relationship. Lately, however, there's been nothing but silence. If I hadn't started working remotely, I doubt I would have paid attention to any of this. But now that I'm trapped in my apartment with nothing but time, these little differences become all the more clear. They make me remember things that at the moment didn't seem important, and also things that I'd prefer to forget. There are a lot of apartment buildings on this street, some old, some new, without even alleys to divide them. Looking out the window, it's clear how easy it would be to move from one building to another. There are rooftops, sewers, and even empty gaps beneath the buildings. When I had the bathroom redone, the back wall had to be removed. A middle-aged plumber on his smoke break pointed through the gaping hole in the tile wall. The circle of pink insulation around it made the black pit in my wall look like a toothless mouth. Inside was a 3-foot gap filled with a tangle of pipes and dusty spider webs. "I once pulled a rat as big as my arm out of a space like that," the plumber exhaled a cloud of smoke. Another time we found a bedroll, a bottle full of piss, and dirty tissues on the other side of someone's wall. That's the thing about these gaps between buildings. Anyone, or anything, can live there, and there's no way to know until it's too late. At the time, I thought the about-to-retire plumber, him, was just having a laugh at the expense of the remote-working yuppie, me, who couldn't stick 2 pipes together to save his life. But as more and more apartments around me fell into a dark, dead silence, I wasn't so sure. They couldn't all be on vacation. I used to enjoy taking showers at night, but lately I've found myself pressing my ear to the wet tile wall, listening for sounds behind the wall or inside the pipes. And when I dream, my dreams are of falling through that tight, lightless space between the walls. Millions of people live in this city, all strangers to one another. And if one person, or even an entire family, went missing, How long would it take anyone to notice? If several went missing all at once, how long would it take the underfunded, overworked authorities to recognize a pattern? Weeks? Months? Even longer? 3 nights ago, I woke to a sudden crash from below. My eyes snapped open. I lay in the darkness, heart thundering and paralyzed with fright, as something heavy was dragged across the floor of the apartment beneath mine. I finally mustered the courage to get out of bed and investigate, but by then, it was too late. Standing in front of my neighbor's bare wooden door, I realized how alone and unarmed I truly was. Ani? I whispered my downstairs neighbor's name, but there was no response. A few hours later, after the sun came up this time, I tried again. I was about to give up when I remembered that I'd watered Ani's plants for a month while she was on vacation. She'd told me to keep the spare key. It was probably still in my kitchen drawer. I knocked, rang, and made every other sound I could think of before entering her apartment. I knew full well that what I was doing was probably illegal, and definitely an invasion of privacy. Ani's apartment smelled faintly of marijuana and mint oil, just as I remembered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was another odor hiding under those familiar scents, something foul and reptilian. The blinds were drawn, and flies buzzed around a half-eaten bowl of soup on the kitchen table. A knocked-over chair lay on the floor beside it. Ani? I tried again. My neighbor's jackets and shoes were all in their places. Water dripped from the washcloth in her shower. It was like she had never left the apartment. And yet, my eyes were drawn to the large ventilation shaft in the bathroom wall. To my anxious mind, it looked like an empty eye socket, perhaps with something nameless staring out at me from the other side. The wall below it was discolored somehow. I tiptoed closer through the gloomy apartment and reached out to touch it. The wall was slick with a slimy substance that emitted that same strange odor. The floor creaked behind me. What the hell do you think you're doing? A woman who looked like a younger version of Ani stood in the doorway, her mouth open in shock. Ami's sister, Ellen. She was already dialing the cops. I looked down at the flashlight in my left hand and the hammer in my right. I can explain, I pleaded. I was just looking for Ami. I heard a weird noise last night, and then when she didn't answer the door, I thought... My voice trailed off. Ellen glared at me skeptically with her thumb frozen above the call button. With one hand on her hip, she slowly lowered her phone. You touch anything? Ellen asked. What? No, I just... Good. I was supposed to meet Ami for lunch, but she never showed. And my sister would die before she'd miss an appointment. I hoped not, but given the circumstances, I kept my mouth shut. Ellen opened the blinds and rummaged through her sister's things while I did my best to describe what I heard. I don't get it, Ellen frowned. Her wallet, phone, keys, they're all here. Unless Ami walked out of here in her PJs, she should be around here somewhere. But there was no sign of Ami. Not under the bed, not on the balcony. She was just gone. After an awkward mid-hallway handshake, Ellen and I parted ways. I still wasn't sure if she planned to go to the police, and if so, I didn't dare to share my theory with her. But that weird mucus was still thick on my fingers. After a fitful nap, I decided to ask the older couple across from me if they'd seen or heard anything strange. As I crossed the corridor, however, a horrible thought struck me. What if they didn't answer? What if I was the last one left, alone in the building with whatever had taken Ami? The 2 minutes between my knock and Marie Puig opening her door felt eternal. I dragged myself out of my paranoid thoughts and tried to smile. I told Mrs. Puig that I'd heard some disturbing things lately and asked if we could speak somewhere private. She motioned me inside and put a kettle on. Her husband had gone out, but would be back shortly. In Mrs. Puig's apartment, not a hair was out of place. A loud game show boomed from the television, and the air smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh cookies. My own half-baked theory was starting to feel very crazy indeed. I stammered through a short version of Ami's disappearance and asked if Marie Puig had noticed anything unusual lately. Not since I let my hearing aid go, Mrs. Puig laughed. You'll have to forgive me, but I can barely hear anything at all. I've got an appointment to get a new one next week. Things just aren't made like they used to be. When was the last time you saw Ami? Yesterday night. She was arguing with some man on the phone. Mrs. Puig leaned in close. In situations like this, it's always the boyfriend. Trust me. Disappointed, I returned to my apartment and tried to lose myself in the mountain of unanswered emails and incomplete tasks that awaited me. The sun had set by the time I finally logged off, exhausted. I was on my way to the shower when I looked up and realized for the first time that all the units in my building had the same oversized ventilation shaft. I reached out my hand to touch the wall below it, and when I took my fingers away, they were coated in a familiar smelling slime. I went to the gym to shower. I couldn't stomach being naked and alone with whatever might be on the other side of my wall. On my way home, I found Mrs. Puig, well-dressed as always, being helped into a waiting taxicab. She waved me over. "I meant to tell you," she practically shouted into my ear. "My husband never came back from his walk this morning. The police are combing the park for him and everything. I'm going to stay with my son until things get settled down. Just thought you ought to know." With that, she was gone. A clammy, lonely sensation crept up my spine as I returned to my apartment. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I ought to do the same thing. Rent a hotel room someplace, wait for all this to just blow over. But I'd have to come back eventually. And what if whatever was between the walls was still hungry when I did? Even though it was after 10 p.m., I grabbed my trusty hammer and used plywood to board up every vent, every window, every other access point to my apartment that I could think of. I didn't have to worry about noise complaints. I probably didn't have any neighbors left to disturb. Uncounted hours later, I woke up in the pitch blackness of my sealed-up apartment. My home was as dark as the dream I'd been having. Another nightmare of dusty insulation and tangled pipes. A pounding sound was coming from somewhere inside my apartment. 3 methodical taps, one after the other. It was no random noise. Something was trying to get in. I grabbed my flashlight, but its batteries must have died after my excursion into Amy's unit. Lost in my own apartment and unable to find a light switch, I bounced off of furniture that seemed to have moved during the night until I finally glimpsed a glow up ahead. The hallway. That's where the pounding was coming from. Daylight blinded me as I flung open my front door. A slender Asian man in a black suit and tie stood before me. "Lucas Williams?" he asked. I nodded, shielding my eyes from the painful brightness. "I'm Agent Wei. I'm investigating some dangerous, unusual occurrences in your neighborhood, and I believe that you might be able to help me. Can I step inside?" I let out a deep sigh of relief. The cavalry was here. The authorities had finally figured out what was going on, and they were going to take care of it. In retrospect, I probably should have looked more closely at Agent Wei's badge. I should have asked him for a warrant or spoken to him outside. But at the time, I was so thrilled to find out that I wasn't crazy that I welcomed the young man with open arms. I flicked on the lights, embarrassed by the boarded up, chaotic mess of my apartment. Agent Wei, however, seemed to take it in stride. "As I'm sure you've noticed, Lucas, there have been a number of disappearances in this area." I nodded vigorously. "As part of our investigation, we're asking the residents of buildings on these streets to permit us to temporarily install motion-activated cameras in their apartment. These cameras will alert us to the presence of any intruder in your unit and allow us to respond immediately." I frowned. This was unexpected. I wanted to help, but still, cameras, watching me all the time. "Please, Lucas, help us to help you." Of course, in the end, I agreed. With his slick black suit and sidearm, Agent Wei seemed trustworthy. And besides, what choice did I have if I wanted my life to go back to normal? After Agent Wei installed his camera and left, however, I found something I would have mentioned to him if I had noticed it sooner. The plywood I had used to cover the ventilation shaft lay on the floor. It had fallen or been pushed out of place. Although I should have known better, I replaced the batteries in my flashlight, mounted a stool, and stuck my head into the ventilation shaft. The dark, narrow space was about the size of my head, and it was difficult to look around. At first, I saw nothing but dust, but then I caught sight of the man-sized trail of slime that slithered off into the darkness. Shuddering, I replaced the plywood and doubled the amount of nails that I hammered into it. For 3 days, I heard nothing from Agent Wei. As far as I could tell, there were no new disappearances either. But on the 3rd morning, I woke once again to urgent pounding on my door. I was in such a hurry to answer it that I didn't notice that the plywood covering the vent had once again fallen to the floor. "Lucas Williams?" Agent Way asked again, as if to confirm that I was really me. "We've discovered something you need to see. May we come in?" This time, Agent Way wasn't alone. Two more men in black suits were behind him. A dark, spindly man he called Agent Gelida, and a stocky, nervous woman who went by Agent Lopez. Agent Way seemed much more on edge than he had during his last visit. The others swept my apartment as we spoke. I started to protest, but then I remembered that the agents had already seen every corner of it anyway, via their cameras. "I'm going to ask you to take a survey for me, Lucas." Agent Way sat me down at my work desk with a paper and pen. "It's very important that you answer all of the questions honestly. Can you do that for me, Lucas?" I had no idea what was going on, but I nodded. After all, what was the harm in answering a few questions? While I was busy filling in bubbles and ticking boxes, Agents Gelida and Lopez scanned my walls with strange instruments, collected samples, and set up a laptop on my kitchen table. Although I strained my ears to their limit, I wasn't able to eavesdrop on the hushed conversation between them. Besides, I was struggling with some of the questions. As I answered them, an unsettling pattern seemed to emerge, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. "How long have you lived in this unit? When was the last time you ate? What is your earliest memory? Where is the last place you slept? Are you sure you want to do it here?" Agent Lopez was hissing to Agent Way. It was all I heard of their conversation before Agent Way motioned for me to sit in front of the laptop that was open in front of the kitchen table. He nodded through the answers to my survey questions, as though they confirmed something he'd long suspected. As he prepared a video to play on the screen, I was uncomfortably aware of the aggressive presence of Agents Gelida and Lopez behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that their hands rested on their weapons. "I'm going to show you a video now, Lucas," Agent Way explained, "and I warn you, what you're about to see may disturb you. Please try to remain calm." I didn't understand what I had to be disturbed about. After all, the image on the screen was me. It was a night vision recording of my bedroom, captured by the cameras Agent Way had installed. He fast-forwarded through several hours of me sleeping, tossing and turning in bed, and then, in the recording, I watched my left leg suddenly stuck out rigidly beneath the sheets. It seemed to extend somehow, followed by my right. My hands pawed at my bedroom wall as my arms and fingers stretched, almost doubling in length. I brought my hand to my mouth as I watched the me on the screen descend into something hideous and wrong and slither across the floor toward the bathroom ventilation shaft. I was still processing the nightmarish video when Agent Way brought up another clip. This was grainier footage from a security camera. It showed Marie Pug's husband, Javier, walking through a dark alley on the far side of our building. As he passed a sewer grate, a horrifically distended hand that I now recognized as my own shot up with tremendous force and grabbed his leg, dragging him down. I'd seen enough. I retched all over the floor, but turned away from the puddle, immediately afraid of what or who I might see in it. "We're aware that you're a special case," Agent Way was saying, from what felt like very far away. "And we know that it's not your fault. For beings like you, this is part of a natural cycle that occurs every 30 years or so. We're going to get you the help you need, but there are crimes here that have to be answered for." Louise Dubois, Rachel Kellerson and her two children, Tom and Royce, Javier Puig, Ami Martin, and several other... "Wait," I held up a hand weakly. "Ami Martin, that can't be. I was in my apartment when she disappeared. I heard her..." I fell silent as a groaning noise echoed through the pipes above us. "Fuck!" Agent Lopez drew her pistol. "What?" Agent Gelida responded. "That means there are two of them." From the darkness of the ventilation shaft in my bathroom, a pair of glowing eyes stared out at me and grinned.